Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we'll be diving into the Warrior in the Shadowlands Alpha. Now, before we really dive into it, Shadowlands is in the Alpha. This is an early build of where classes are at. They're not finalized, and we're not even on max level characters, so as a level 50 Warrior, please take everything with kind of a grain of salt. We still don't have all the Covenant abilities to test, and there'll probably be future changes to the Warrior class itself. However, we still want to dive into the Warrior to see what it looks like in the current version of the Shadowlands Alpha. Now, Warriors have gotten a couple of changes, mostly to the base core toolkit, in terms of the class-based abilities that they have compared to the spec-specific ones. And there's been some changes in the talents, mostly with protection, and some smaller changes with fury and arms. So let's take a look at where Warriors currently are at in Shadowlands Alpha. We're going to start off with the basic abilities that every warrior gets in the warrior tree, and there's a lot more of them now. Then we'll go to the spec-specific ones, take a look at talents, and hit a train dummy, and I can explain you a little bit what the gameplay looks like. So take a look at the warrior from the very start. In the general, we don't have anything new compared to warlocks. They actually have one ability that made it into the general, which I don't think it's supposed to happen. Let's start off with Battle Shout, which has been changed a little. 15-second cooldown and 5% attack power increase. Same thing has been done with mages with their intellect, which is only 5%. And I believe Power Word Shield might have gotten that change, but don't quote me. Then we have Zerker Rage still in the game at a 1-minute cooldown. Charge still there, generates 20 rage. You have Execute, which is still going to be a big hitter for when it comes to Arms Warrior. Hamstring is still in the game. We have Heroic Leap, Heroic Throw, which by all measure of damage, this actually does somewhat of decent damage now. And also, warriors get Ignore Pain. This is a prot warrior ability that made it available to all specs. So it's going to be quite an interesting defensive. 40 rage, 12-second cooldown, fight through the pain, ignoring 50% of the damage taken, up to 1,800 total damage prevented. So this is a very interesting wording for the shield, and for Arms Warrior, this ability costs less rage, since rage is harder to generate when playing arms. But for Fury and Prod, the rage numbers are going to be different, but equal to what the specs can offer up. You also get Intervene back, so at 30-second cooldown, 25-yard range. Run at a high speed towards an ally, intercepting all melee damage and ranged attacks against them for 6 seconds while they remain within 10 yards. This is going to not only give warriors incredible amount of mobility. In PvP, this could have really cool uses. Imagine intervening to your priest right before they get hit with a sap, if sap works with intervene. That could be something very interesting. And if ability were to be a killing blow on an ally, you can intervene, take that damage, so your ally might be able to survive after. We still have Intimidating Shout. Pommel's still in the game. Rallying Cry is 15% of temporary health with 3-minute cooldown for it. Then we have Shattering Throw, making a comeback at a 3-minute cooldown. Hurl your weapon at the enemy, causing a bunch of physical damage. Ignoring armor, removing any magical immunity. Deals up to 500% increased damage on absorbed shields. Now, finding players to test this with that I can coordinate and figure out if I can test this is hard. It sounds to me that Shattering Throw, if let's say somebody has Power Word Shield on them, it might deal insane amounts of damage if they have absorbs. So going through Monk's Cocoon could be good, unless Blizzard talks about absorb shields as in the immunity. So if you shatter through a mage's ice block or shatter through a paladin's bubble, you do damage with, but while also shattering their protection. But I guess this one we'll have to wait and see until further testing. For now, there's a lot of potential with Shattering Throw. You have Shield Block, which requires a shield, but lets you block all melee attacks against you for 6 seconds, with 2 charges at 30 rage. Doesn't mean that this is something you'll be using as a warrior, but you have access to it. And you also have access to Shield Slam. Let's say you gotta get very defensive against a rogue and you want to kind of play Shield Block and Shield Slam. Something for a warrior you can technically do is do weapon swaps and try to see if you can get yourself a bit more tankiness in physical setting and maybe in PvP, but this is unlikely to be used in dungeons and raids. You also still have Slam, which does quite a bit of damage. Spell Reflection is baseline. Don't even need to equip a shield to use it. You'll redirect a magical damage back to the enemy. If you can reflect the spell, you will. However, if you cannot reflect the spell, which is a case in AoE situations in dungeons and raids, you will take 20% reduced magical damage on a 25-second cooldown. This gives warriors great survivability inside of dungeons and raids. So there's certain the bosses you could probably think of, like N'Zoth, that does shadow damage constantly, and there's moments where you just take a lot of shadow damage. Well, now as Warrior on 25-second cooldown, you can use Spell Reflection, and while you won't reflect this AoE ability back at the boss, most likely, you will at least take 20% less damage from magic abilities. So tankiness for Warriors is going to be brought back, together with Ignore Pain could be exceptionally good. You also still have Taunt, Victory Rush, Whirlwind is still in the game for the AoE, and later you'll unlock at level 24 Challenging Shot for all specs of Warriors, even DPS, where you taunt all enemies within 10 yards of you for 6 seconds, which could be great in utility. And then you'll also unlock at level 56 Rank 2 Rallying Cry, which grants additional 5% temporary maximum health, taking your Rallying Cry from 15% temporary health to 20%, which is nice. When it comes to actual Arms Warrior based abilities, you still got good old reliable Blade Storm. Die by the Sword is a 3-minute cooldown for 30% damage reduction with 100% parry. Mortal Strike is still in the game with its Mortal Strike effect for healing reduction. Overpower can still go through dodge and parry's attacks, still increases Mortal Strike damage. You get Piercing Howl on a 30-second cooldown, which is normally a Fury Warrior slow. Piercing Howl, 30-second cooldown, no cost to the rage, reduces the movement speed of enemies around you within 12 yards by 70%, gives Warrior even more control, especially in groups. So this is going to be very, very interesting, as all specs, I think, are going to get Piercing Howl, but we'll just have to check. I'm pretty sure Fury and Arms do, maybe Prot might be the only one that doesn't. You also have Sweeping Strikes, 30-second cooldown, for a 12-second duration, which I think 30-second cooldown might be as long. But one thing that's different here too is it does 75% of the damage to a secondary target. So it's still lets you cleave to targets, just the second target takes 75% of the damage instead. Still have that mastery with Deep Wounds, and the numbers on mastery is still going to be incredibly high. I don't know if Blizzard will end up changing and adjusting it in the future, but right now, yeah, it's still going to be kind of nuts. You still have Seasoned Soldier, you still have Tactician procs, and you'll also be able to get a rank 2 Die by the Sword. Reduces the cooldown by 60 seconds, so you'll go from a 3-minute to a 2-minute, which is going to be great, even more for survivability of arms. And then Sweeping Strikes increase the duration of your Sweeping Strikes by 3 seconds, where it's already a 12-second ability. So these are the changes to the spell abilities when it comes to your Arms Warrior. When it comes to your talents, in the first row we have not a lot of changes. We still have Sudden Death, Skull Splitter, and War Machine. Level 25 row we have Double Time, Impending Victory, and Stormbolt. In the level 30 we have Massacre at 35% health and executes. Fervor for Battle still allows you to slam more Whirlwinding, and still have Rend. At level 35 tier we have Second Wind, restores 6% health every 1 second when you have not taken damage for 5 seconds, which I still think you could maybe adjust, but apparently it's really good in Dungeons and Keys still, and can be good in raids. You got Bounding Stride and Defensive Stance still. You have, at level 40, Collateral Damage, which allows you to get back rage when you're sweeping striking. Warbreaker to give you that big Colossus Smash on multiple targets. And Cleave, but Cleave is a little different. Strikes up to 5 enemies in front of you, so it has a target cap. For a bit of physical damage, actually quite a bit of physical damage, inflicting deep wounds, only usable after Whirlwind hits 3 or more targets, so you can't use Cleave as just like a base ability. Maybe because it does quite a bit of damage. I mean, 832 damage versus your Mortal Strike for 808 to cost less rage. So I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep Cleave as a good ability, but most usable if you're only hitting multiple enemies. So you will have this Whirlwind thing behind it, so you won't have the freedom to use Cleave, which is going to feel kind of weird. At level 45, In for the Kill, still going to give you haste whenever you Warbreaker or Colossus Smash an enemy. 20% of the target is below 20% health. Avatar giving you 20% increased damage, 20% rage, 1.5 minute cooldown. And Deadly Calm at a 1 minute cooldown with slight changes. When you use this, it reduces your rage cost of the next 4 abilities by 100%. So it doesn't give you a buff where it's like, okay, within the small window, use as many rage-based abilities. It will just give you the next 4 abilities that use rage won't. Also gives you a passive, maximum rage increased by 30. While that's a nice passive and can be really good whenever you're going for a big Warbreaker, trying to dump as much rage into your Warbreaker windows, are you actually going to be able to sit on that 30 rage? Are you going to be able to pull 30 rage? Because Arms Warrior is pretty expensive on rage abilities. But it's still a nice change for it. And it's also off GCD, that's another thing. So it might end up making some play maybe in PvP. Maybe doing like big execute phases. Then you have 50, we have Anger Management. Every 20 rage is spent on rage-based abilities, it reduces Warbreaker and Blaze Storm by a second. And then you have Dreadnought. Overpower has 2 charges, and it has Seismic Wave trait baked into it. So if you take this for AoE, this could be decent. And then you have Ravager, which no longer replaces Bladestorm. So now as an Arms Warrior, you can have Ravager and Bladestorm as part of your utility. 1 minute cooldown, does quite a bit of damage in the alpha, generates 7 rage each time it deals damage. So this could essentially be good. Bladestorming while Ravager spins, while the enemy is warbreaking. So this could be a really good playstyle for Arms. When it comes to the playstyle for the Arms Warrior, you're still going to do the same thing as you did before. You can Battle Shout into a charge, then you'll go into maybe a Skull Splitter, and try to get yourself a big setup with a Warbreaker, and just as many rage spending abilities just sank into your Colossus Smash window. Hell, you can even go for a Bladestorm, because now you don't have any of the trades that really have you spend rage to gain a strength buff. Now you can just hit you the biggest abilities possible, like Bladestorm, and maybe even Ravager together during that window. So essentially it simplifies the playstyle for Arms Warrior. And I think that's not a bad thing, because Arms Warrior for all of BFA has had a very specific playstyle because of essences and traits. And of course, as this guy right here, the Warrior has, he does have the Spear from the Kyrian, which takes a little bit of questing to unlock. But you also have different Covenant abilities that will also come into play in order to change up your gameplay as well. But as Arms Warrior is right now, it's actually pretty simple, at least in terms of how it plays currently. And I like that freedom, because I feel like Arms has been kind of locked between very specific builds for quite a bit of time. This is also a spec that benefits highly from haste. A lot of abilities are reduced heavily by haste, Skull Splitter, Immortal Strikes. So with low haste on the alpha, you're not really going to see the best side of the Warrior. However, this spec still feels really good to play. And I think that the changes going into Shadowlands, taking away the essences and traits, it gives you a little more freedom of how you can engage with the world. What's also great about Arms, what I really like, is the defensive nature of it, because Arms is the one spec that actually has 0 self-healing. Unless you go slaying enemies and you go for Victory Rush, you don't have anything reliable that can give you good heals. So being able to pop Ignore Pain and sacrifice some of your rage in order to actually be tanky, so you don't need to die immediately when a boss mechanic goes off, or popping off Spell Reflection, which in some dungeons can reflect certain abilities back at enemies, which can be exciting. But in raid fights, this is where it actually will be really good. The damage reduction that comes from it on such short cooldown and no cost for rage feels really good to play with. There's potential with Dreadnought too. There's potential with Deadly Calm as well. Cleave could be incredibly powerful for AoE. So if anything, I think Arms will at least be this massive AoE juggernaut. It is one of those classes that, as a lot of characters have caps on their AoE, Arms cap with Bladestorm is up to 8 targets. So Bladestorm could do quite a bit of damage and apply a pretty big bleed. And I believe Ravager is actually the same way with, yes, 8 targets. So Arms can, essentially, if you have 8 enemies in a single area, if you want to, you can have the biggest burst in AoE. All you need to do is maybe get a big old charge, throw in Ravager into a Warbreaker, and try to get a Bladestorm rolling, and now you have all these blades spinning. Every enemy takes insane amounts of damage, and then you're just kind of hoping that your tank is able to hold aggro while you're just tearing things up. And then of course you have a lot of cool utilities like Shattering Throw as well. That's going to be great in PvP. So Arms is actually not feeling too terrible. It is a more base version of where Arms Warriors usually are at, but definitely does not feel terrible to play. Next we're going to move on to the good old Fury Warrior, a very near and dear spec to many of you guys. So let's take a look at what Fury Warriors have, and I believe in the class tree they don't really have anything new, so we could skip that. They do have Slam, which is interesting. It's a 20 rage, but it does very little damage compared to Arms. You won't be using this ability from the spellbook, but there are ways to add it into your rotation. Take a look at the Fury-based abilities to see how good old Bloodthirst for 3% of your maximum health, which I believe is a nerf from the 4%, but also generate, faster cooldown because of haste. We have Enrage Regen that reduces damage by 30% and additional 20% healing with Bloodthirst. You got ourselves Execute Still, which does lower damage than that of Arms Warrior, which is interesting, but with certain talents they actually buff your Execute, which might be a legitimate playstyle now. You still have Pierce and Howl, the same as the one for Arms, but means that Fury Warriors will be using Hamstring to get regular slows, so that'll be very interesting. Ranging Blow is still in the game. We have a Rampage still for 80 rage. We have ourselves Recklessness, Go Berserk, increasing all rage generation by 100% and granting new abilities 20% increased critical strike chance for 10 seconds. Whirlwind is still in the game, and it still does that whole cleave capability for 50% of the damage. We have Enrage as a passive, which can be used on Bloodthirst for 45% chance, and Rampage for 100%, but I believe Bloodthirst is 45 because of a talent here, so if I were to change it, I believe it goes down to 30%, so with Fresh Meat talent it does increase, so put that back on, but just so you are aware. We also have the ability for Enrage. It gives you 30% more damage based on your Mastery, I believe, which is at 31, so yes. Based on your Mastery, Haste by 15%, Movement Speed by 10 for 4 seconds. Mastery is Unshackled, increases damage done while enraged by an extra amount. You still have Titan's Grip, allowing you to dual wield a pair of two-handed weapons. However, for single-minded Fury, Blizzard hasn't implemented it in the game yet. There's still possibility that they might, because they're given ability for Frost Death Knights to have a two-hander or one-hander, and it might have some small changes in terms of the gameplay and the playstyle. So there's still potential for them to add it in the future, but as of right now on the alpha, it isn't there. You also can get Recklessness rank 2 at a higher level, so you increase the duration by 2 seconds. Normally it is a 10-second duration. Also, you can get Execute that does extra damage, which probably will explain why right now it doesn't do that much, and later it will be doing better. I guess it's something for leveling and balancing of how Fury Warriors are supposed to play and feel. When it comes to the talents for Fury Warrior, we still have War Machine, Sudden Death, and Inner Rage is in the front row, which is interesting. Rage and Blows cooldowns reduced by 1 second, damage increased by 20. So this whole row plays with your rage generation. Do you want random executes that cost no rage? Do you want War Machine for extra rage with auto attacks and killing enemies giving you extra rage as well? Or Inner Rage for the whole full control? Level 25 row, we have Double Time, Impending Victory, and Stormbolt. At level 30, we have Fresh Meat. Bloodthirst always enrages you the first time you strike the target, so great for openers, and has a 15% chance to trigger Enrage. So this will be interesting to play with. On the same row is Massacre, where executes can be used on enemies below 35% health, and its cooldown is reduced by 1.5 seconds. Right now it is 5 seconds, reduced by haste, so you get it down to 4.5. So it's almost like a global. So a global faster you'll be able to use your executes. On the same row you also have Fury Slash, does meager physical damage, but increases your haste and generates 4 rage. Level 35 row, we have Furious Charge, where charge increases the healing from your Bloodthirst by 250. Bounding Stride, and War Paint. In level 40, we have Fervor for Battle. So this is the Arms Warrior talent added to Fury. Whirlwind generates 3 more rage and slams your primary target. Now, Slam doesn't really do that much damage by itself, as we saw, but it costs 20 rage. So 185 physical damage extra on top of your Whirlwind, which does 165 damage on as well. It almost basically doubles the damage of your Whirlwind, so I guess it's not really a bad thing. You also have Frothing Berserker, which is seeming like a really good talent as of the Fury Warrior community. They believe that this might be the meta, at least early while we don't have a lot of gear. Frothing Berserker, when you reach 100 rage, you gain 10% haste, 20% movement speed for 6 seconds. And then you have an interesting ability of Onslaught with fairly short-ish cooldown. Brutally attack an enemy for a bunch of physical damage, requires Enrage, generates 10 rage. So this is going to be very interesting to play with. At level 45 row, we have Wrecking Ball, become enraged. Becoming enraged has a 25% chance to make the next Whirlwind deal 300% increased damage. Does not increase the damage of your slam if you're running Fervor for Battle. You have Dragon Roar at a 35-second cooldown, does a bit of damage, reduces movement speed of enemies by 50%, generates 10 rage, and then you have Blaze Storm. Does quite a lot more damage than before, at least relative to the other abilities. So 1,700 on the alpha is actually quite a bit of damage over 3.3 seconds. Striking 8 targets, so it does have a cap. You're immune to movement impaired effects and loss control, but generates 25 rage over this duration. Level 50 row, we have Reckless Abandon, still as it was. Anger Management, exactly as it is for Arms, and Siege Breaker, that increases damage done to targets by 50%. Siege Breaker still has this Whirlwind interaction, where if you Whirlwind, you'll cleave for the next few abilities, and if you Siege Breaker, that will also cleave and apply the debuff to enemies as well. Now, the biggest change I would say that I didn't really get to for Arms is the defensive, or Fury. Ignore Pain is quite expensive for Fury Warriors. However, Fury Warriors as a class has a fairly easy way of generating rage. You'll charge into the enemy, pop your full burst with Recklessness, and you'll get into the rotation with Rampages, get yourself those big old Raging Blows, Bloodthirst to keep your Enrage rolling, and you'll just try to stay in Enrage as best as you can. I feel at the beginning of Shadowlands, staying in Enrage is going to be quite difficult because, well, you don't have all this gear and all this haste to give you all that extra stats in order to get your abilities a way faster playstyle. Because, well, it's going to be the beginning of the expansion. That's kind of how Fury Warriors is always going to be. But as you get better gear and a lot more haste, you might end up giving a decent playstyle for Fury, but as you can see right now, it's kind of difficult to stay in rage at all times compared to on live if you have full gear. Like, it's just the playstyle of the enrage mechanic is a little bit more sluggish. But still, it feels really, really good, and you can fix it with a couple abilities. There are a couple abilities that are looking like really good for damage, while others are looking like really good for your rage generation. Apparently, Frothing Berserker, a lot of people are saying that might be the go-to talent, and while it might not feel that great to overcap and spend 100 rage first before you can really hit your enemy with the Rampage, it might be the go-to because of all that extra haze that it provides. And maybe go even with Siegebreaker for some big, massive burst. So then you could have yourself a really solid playstyle. So I guess if you want to go for solid, let's go with this and try with this playstyle. We'll keep Wrecking Ball, because Wrecking Ball is actually super enjoyable and I think it plays really, really well into the spec itself. Go for the full setup. Get ourselves the big damage. Trying to get our Raging Blows in so we're not overcapping on those ever. We got 100 rage. We got Frothing Berserker, trying to get through that ASAP. Frothing Berserker didn't achieve Frothing Berserker, so you have to be very, very careful if you're playing with Frothing. Take full advantage of it. That means you will have to overcap on rage a little. So I'm going to Whirlwind extra. I'm going to Bloodthirst to make sure I reach that cap. And I'm going to use all my abilities, which does give you a little bit faster generation of rage. So it's your auto attack so much faster. You have so many more abilities that are coming off cooldown a little bit quicker. So this might be kind of like the band-aid until we get Fury Warrior with some gear. But it is still an option. And overall, Fury feels very smooth, still as it is. It feels like there's a lot more options on how you can choose to play. And there's some really interesting choices. I've actually been enjoying Onslaught a lot. I like just having an extra ability that I can press while I'm enraged. And I've been enjoying Anger Management together with Wrecking Ball a lot, actually. So that's been kind of the fun playstyle for me. But you are able to get a bunch of rage, get enraged very, very quickly, and you also have a lot of defensiveness as well. Not only is Fury Warrior to have extra health because of the extra weapons, but together with Ignore Pain, which means you'll have to sacrifice a Rampage, which does not feel good, but if that means you don't need to die to a mechanic, it just might be something as a Fury Warrior you just might have to get used to. But having, let's say, something like Spell Reflection feels really, really good. And yeah, overall, I'd say Fury is in a pretty good spot, honestly. It's really, really enjoyable. I've been enjoying Arms and Fury in their own different ways, and I know most warriors will end up, if you're, let's say, constantly raiding, you want to play the best spec possible. It is really tough right now to tell which spec of Fury of Warriors is going to be the best spec for, like, the end game content, but I guess only time will tell with that. But both of them feel really, really good. The only thing, again, that feels super weird for Fury is just to build up all that rage and then ignore pain. And yes, while you have a massive buff that lets you ignore damage, the fact that you didn't hit that into an enrage to go back into your enrage cycle definitely feels weird. However, this could be really, really good. Ignore Pain. Imagine popping Ignore Pain and then taking some aggro off of your tank with Challenging Shout, and then maybe kiting those enemies together, hitting them with a Piercing Howl. So you might actually be able to use this in raids and dungeon scenarios as like a utility in a sense. So overall, lots of possibilities for what a Fury Warrior can do, and overall, this really does feel pretty great. At first there were two, and then there was one. We'll be taking a look at the Protection Warrior and where they're standing in when it comes to Shadowlands Alpha. Taking a look at the base abilities for the Warrior, you have everything everybody else has, and Whirlwind, in case you need to do AoE damage. Challenging Shout for them, I think, is going to be really, really strong in the future. Then it comes to protection-based abilities, you have Avatar still as your main base ability. Demoralizing Shout at 45-second cooldown, 20% damage reduction. Devastate, Last Stand, and a 2-minute cooldown, but I believe there's a talent that changes that. I think it might be Bolster? Maybe not. Last Stand duration. Cooldown is reduced by 1 minute. Yeah, okay, no, it is actually a bolster. So bolster's still in the game, but we'll look at talents in just a minute. You have Revenge to be able to cleave enemies down. Shield Wall for 4-minute cooldown, 40% damage reduction. Shockwave for the AoE stun in front of you. Thunderclap still in the game as the bread and butter of the prot warrior. You have Deep Wounds to give a bleed to enemies whenever you hit them with Devastate or Revenge. You have Mastery, critical block, where increase the block, chance to block by 11 or almost 12%, and chance to critical block by 35%. And increase your attack power. Repose increases your parry equal to crit. You have Vanguard, Hardened Battle. Your stamina is increased to 45. Your armor is increased by 75 of your strength. And you have 2 ranks to unlock as you level. You have rank 2 Avatar, which generates 10 more rage. And right now, Avatar generates 20 rage, so it's going to be 30 rage instead. And you'll get rank 2 Shield Wall that will increase your damage reduction by additional 10%, where it's already 40%. Taking a look at protection in the talents, there's a couple of changes that are new. I'm not a prot main, so I won't be able to tell you every talent and where all abilities have moved. But from what I talked with my guildies and friends, I can tell you what I've seen. War Machine is new. Your auto attacks generate 50 more rage. That sounds really good. It doesn't actually generate that much more rage, sadly. Maybe there's something about the numbers that just doesn't function, but 50% more rage and gives you like 3 rage per auto attack doesn't really sound like a good talent, at least right now, but maybe it's just not functional. You have Punish in the row for level 15, as well as Impending Victory. In level 25 row, you have double time, so you can have 2 charges as your prot warrior. You still have your Intervene, but you have charge back now. So 2 charges to generate rage instead of intervenes all the time. It's going to be pretty good. You have Rumbling Earth when Shockwave strikes at least 3 targets, cooldown reduced by 15 seconds, or Stormbolt if you need more single target stuns. In level 30, you have Best Serve Cold, you have Devastator, and Dragon Roar. So that's going to be very interesting. This ability generates rage and can be maybe okay for pure AoE, but I think the slow will also be good. One thing that I haven't actually looked, feels like Prot Warrior is the only spec that does not have a piercing shout. However, Thunderclap reduces movement speed by 20% for 10 seconds, so that can be used to kite, but if you need extra movement speed, I guess you can go for a better slow with Dragon's Roar. Maybe that's what Blizzard was thinking as an option. Level 35 row, we have Crackling Thunder, Bounding Stride, and Menace. In level 40 row, we have Bolster on the same row as Indomitable, which heals you for every 10 rage you spend. Every 10 rage gives you back 1% of your maximum health, so I guess it kind of gives you some healing for a Protection Warrior. And Never Surrender. Ignore Pain prevents 40 to 100 more damage based on your missing health to make this ability a little bit better of a, well, defensive. Then you have level 45 with Into the Fray, where normally it was in the level 1 row, but it's on a competitive field with Booming Voice and Unstoppable Force. So if you were hoping for a big wombo combo with Crackling Thunder and Unstoppable Force, Booming Voice for prot, it looks like Blizzard has kind of gutted that, which is a little bit sad. Level 45, we have Heavy Repercussions, we have Anger Management, and Ravager. So there's a bit of difference between what the warrior community feels about Protection Warrior versus how I feel about it. There's a little bit of concern of how well prot will perform because of the talent changes to prot. It has been said that you don't have cool combos like Crackling Thunder with Booming Voice and Unstoppable Force for a fast-paced, stomping around all over the place playstyle. And some of the changes to defensives like Never Surrender, Indomitable Bolster, and moving around Into the Fray against these 2 abilities and War Machine, and it's a little bit confusing. So some warriors are concerned of the viability as a tank going into the next expansion. However, there's still plenty of time for Blizzard to adjust. So as a non-warrior main, I don't really know just how bad it is for prot, but I did want to mention this because even my guildies said that the warrior community is happy with Arms and Fury and a little concerned with where prot is going to be. In terms of the actual playstyle for prot, it feels great to play. I mean, it's one of the better feeling tanks in the game right now. It just feels like you're just really up in your face, and like Arms and Fury feel like you're in there to do damage. It feels like prot is there to do the same, while having great utility with defensives, and overall very good feeling tank overall. There's some things that apparently make Prot a little bit stronger, like the buff to the damage of Revenge. So this actually can do quite a bit of damage now. Thunderclap still does a bit of damage, but also having Execute on your bards will help you a little bit extra finishing power on the enemy. Coming back for Hamstring is going to be nice, so you'll have a constant slow as well. Challenging Shout is going to be really strong for Prot in order to engage a group of enemies and really grab a bunch of aggro at the very start. On a 4-minute cooldown, but still really strong. Shattering Throw is also back, so that's going to be really strong for Prot as well. But compared to like what Arms is getting, what Fury are getting with Spell Reflection, with the own Ignore Pain, it feels like Fury and Arms are looking really solid in terms of the utility abilities. And Prot looks like they are losing some of the combos they had in BFA, and they're getting shuffled around, and it might feel a little bit awkward. But still, in terms of the actual play itself, it feels sturdy. It feels pretty good to play, and you still have remnants of the old school playstyles. If you are playing, let's say, the full playstyle with Sap of Force, you can go for back-to-back, just stomping around all over the place, generating quite a bit of rage as well, and also being able to shield yourself. So the spec still has a lot of damage focus to it, which is great. But with the ability for Revenge doing a little bit more damage now, and having Execute, you might actually be able to do quite a bit more damage than ever before, especially when it comes to the finishing power against a boss. So with Fury Warriors, it really doesn't feel bad to play, but there's still this overarching concern by the people that play Warrior on a regular basis that they're still not sure where Prot is going to be, if this is how it's going to come out. But then again, this is why we get the alphas, this is why we get testing, and this is why people are giving feedback. So the spec, for me, feels great to play, and normally if you're not in the Warrior community or know someone who could tell you, hey, this is good, this is bad, this is a good change, or this is a bad change, someone who can point this out, which I have the possibility, so I might as well use the guildies and stuff for that, you wouldn't even know that there's any issues with the Warrior. It still feels pretty good to play. However, at endgame, there's some concern, but this is early alpha. I wouldn't be completely doom and gloom about it. I just want to make sure that you guys are aware where the spec is at. Although it feels really good to play, but as a non-Prot, not a tank main, essentially that's all I can say. It doesn't feel bad to play. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I couldn't have done this video without some of the dudes that checked into some of the Discords and the streams and gave me their opinions and shared some more knowledge that I wouldn't have had of the Warrior. Overall, very excited for the Arms and Fury. I cannot wait to run around and feel a lot more tankier as Arms with Ignore Pain for certain mechanics and even being able to reflect a few spells in dungeons and overall feel a little bit tankier in raids. I think that's going to feel really good. Abilities like Intervene and so many more utilities that Arms and Fury are going to get, I think it's going to feel really enjoyable to play. Protection, while feels good to play, has some concerns of how good of a tank this will be. So I'm very much hoping the Blizzard does try to make it at least as close as it can to the other tank specs. Overall, it feels great to play and I wouldn't have any concerns until I've been told by, hey, this is what the rest of the Warrior community is concerned about. So you wouldn't really know that this is an issue unless you're really part of it. So I'm hoping that they get a little bit of love in terms of being tanky, or at least being viable in Mythic Plus keys where Warriors have been very strong in that piece of content. But if anything goes down, there's always Arms and Fury that might be insanely good. And apparently there's going to be a Covenant ability with Fury and or Arms Warriors that's insanely strong, I think from the Maldraxxus Necrolords, that might make Warriors something you always want to bring for utility. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. You let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.